You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense with your host, Doug Thorpe. Here's Doug.
Well, hey, everybody, Doug Thorpe here. I've got something a little different today. I'm doing something different for a couple of reasons. Number one, this is going to be episode number 400 in our series of show called Leadership Powered by Common Sense. I'm honored and blessed to have been able to bring together 400 episodes for you. And throughout the journey, there's been a series of common themes, common threads, and basic principles I've tried to maintain. One of which is the notion that I've intentionally tried to stay away from talking about politics and, any deep dives in religious related activity. But I've got to tell you, I had an opportunity recently to interview someone who, in a fashion, touches on both. And I didn't know the episode was going to turn out quite that way, but it did. And now that I look back on it, I'm glad it did. It contains some powerful and important messages, and I think it's not a biased look at any of the topics we discuss, but I think it's an honest look. And specifically, what I want to share is that the gentleman who is my guest, his name is Nimrod Vromen. He is an Israeli. He lives in Israel. He is a businessman. He's an attorney. He, like many of my guests, has had a long career climbing a corporate ladder and then becoming an entrepreneur. However, he also serves as a reservist in the Israeli army. And with world events being what they are and strife and trauma going on in the region, he has been active in some of that. His unit has been routinely called to service during the Hamas uprising and some of the horrific and horrendous things that have happened over the last several months. We actually had trouble scheduling this show because of his active duty obligations. We had times booked, and then he got called to duty, and we had to reschedule. But we finally got an episode together, and now I want to bring this to you. I'm not asking you to judge one way or another. I just encourage you to listen intently with the idea and the commentary that he's got to share as someone who is living it. He is a husband, father, and as I said, businessman. But given the socio-political situation in his region, he lives with an extra dose of deep, grave concern and luckily hope. So hang with us. Now let me introduce to you Nimrod Vromen.
Nice to meet you finally. How you doing?
Finally, I was looking at the journey that in my email log of how many times we've had to reset and do things, but I always say that my experience has been when this happens, we usually have an amazing show, so no pressure. Well, how was your deployment situation? I know that was one of the events.
It's it's been a crazy 2 years. I can't really put them in. I mean, I can speak about them if you want to speak about if you want to speak about this period in the podcast, I'd be happy to. It's hard. It's hard. It's hard being taken away from your family. It's hard facing the cruelty of this war and being involved in it. My role is also relatively unique. We see the other side for all of its weaknesses and its and for all of its they're, in terms of our unit, they're at our mercy. But at the same time, they're also very exposed. Like the bad things that they're doing are also seen, which puts us in a position where we have to make decisions. And there's no way out of it. Like there's only so many quote unquote bad guys you can eliminate before your soul starts tearing up from the inside. And there's only so many bad guys you can decide not to eliminate, only to see them kill your friends on the ground.
Yeah,
So it's just been a very hard 2 years. Yeah.
I can only imagine. Well, I've got a bit of a correlated experience. This is many, many years ago when I was in U.S. Army. I was at the Army Flight School at Fort Rucker, and we had a contingent of Israelis with us. And there was a major that was commander of that unit, and I got to know him pretty well. Have not, I've lost contact with him. I have no idea. Of course, he would be a much older man now, but just getting a flavor in the sense of what you have to live with that imminent threat as a constant element of your life there in the country.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's been hard and in our faces.
yeah, yeah.
That was when was that? What years was that?
Well, that was back in the 70s, late 70s.
Yeah. So in the late 70s, the mindset in Israel was that there was before the peace agreement with Egypt in 1979, there was an actual existential threat to Israel. Like in 1973, in the second in the first Day of Atonement War, um, we were about to launch our nuclear weapons on the whole Middle East and potentially a Western country just to get them involved. They had probably about 10 times more tanks than us, and we were surviving this war on flukes, and the more faithful in our country would say just godly miracles, like this, like on divinity. But they were past the Golan Heights. It took a breach of command by one of our heads of the army, who was called back to protect Tel Aviv, and instead made a racial stereotyping of the enemy, which today is, of course, frowned upon in different aspects of society. But that's what he did. He said, no, they're a patriarchal, respect-based culture, so I should actually drive east and fire at Cairo, and then they'll retreat. And instead of going to protect Tel Aviv like a coward. And he did that, breaching command, probably risking being shot. And it caused them to stop in their tracks, and the Egyptian army was engulfed, and they lost that war. But if he didn't do that, and if another thing didn't happen in the north, we would have been gone. So that was the mindset then. Today, because we lost more people in 3 weeks in the Yom Kippur War than we did in this 2 year period. But today, because of the way that it's done, it's not soldiers, it's they really brutalized like civilians who were that strip of land around Gaza is bloody. It's Woodstock 69. It's peace lovers. They were literally partying for peace, like a Woodstock type party, and they brutally raped them and murdered them. I've seen it. They brutally mutilated them and celebrated it. The kidnappings are horrendous, what they do to them over there. And of course not all 2 million of them are terrorists, not by a long shot. Of course, many of them are simply controlled by ignorance and by corrupt billionaire leaders who are weaponizing their religion on top of them to just regenerate the whole thing. So you have to have empathy towards them, but when their cruelty, no matter how it evolved, it doesn't even matter how it evolved, right? You could have been the worst type of asshole to your neighbor for 100 years, and you could have been responsible for bringing your neighbor to the point of wanting to kill your entire family. It doesn't matter if he's coming to kill your family; you're killing him, and you're blowing the whole street up before he does that. So that the time for retrospect is later, about how they got to this situation. It's a combination of things, but it's so close to the border that everybody's feeling it. I had a talk with my 6-year-old daughter. I'll just tell you the last thing, for me, this is an important part because it's part of the complexity. She went to sleep one night and she said, this was in the beginning, 3 months in. She goes, she's 6 at the time, maybe even, no, she was 5 at the time. It's 5. She says, hey, Dad, are there children in Gaza? I tell her, yes, there are many children in Gaza. She says, well, they must be so poor and suffering. And I'm like, yeah, they are, but why do you think they're poor and suffering? She says, because we're like bombing the hell out of them, aren't we? This was 2 months in when we were already in the ground offensive. And I said, well, we're really not trying to bomb the kids. We're trying to locate the people who did to us what they did on October 7th on that Saturday, and to get them out of the way. We're trying not to bomb the kids, but yeah, they're suffering, but we're trying not to bomb them. And she's like, wow, they're suffering. She's thinking about it. And we are not to any extreme. We're just very pragmatic and realistic at home. But we're in no way to any extreme. And she wasn't in kindergarten at the time. We were living in the bomb shelter. You know, Dad, I think these kids, even if we're not bombing them, they are the kids of the people who did this to us. So we're killing their parents. So they're going to be alone, and then they're going to grow up and do the same thing to us. So I really think we should bomb all the kids as well right now, even though they're suffering. And I'm like, no, that's not what we're doing. That's not what we're doing. I'm trying to protect her. And says, no, Dad, I really think they're gonna do really bad shit to us. I can't see a way out of this. She's 5. So she's not genocidal in her DNA. They brought us with what they showed us to this corner of like, if you're childish in your mindset, you could get there. I can't handle this. The whole place has to just go. But instead you're carrying it out for 2 years. For 2 years. So that was my long answer to how this period has gone.
My. Well, as thin and weak as it is, I will say my thoughts and prayers are with you and all your countrymen. It's just a terrible time in world history, and I know it's been going on for centuries. So I think the big thing that has been proven in the last actually 20 years, there is a whole new tribe of human beings that have no moral compass. And they're perpetrating these acts of violence on countries all over the region there. And, I know here, I've heard debates. My college roommate is a retired brigadier general, and he was in Desert Storm. He was second in command of the 3rd Infantry when they marched on Baghdad and caught Saddam. I talked to him frequently, and all the debate about, well, there's the Geneva Convention, you have to treat people a certain way. No, the enemy's not following any of those covenants.
Yeah.
They're not. And when you get people that are willing to strap bombs to their own body and walk into a crowd, that's a whole different level of depravity.
Yep. Yeah. It's that, and it's also methamphetamine induced. So you add to the whatever origin story this person had, you can add also a substance that is manufactured by their headquarters in Syria and sent to them, like the worst type of crystal meth. So they're also completely manic and senseless when they're doing it. Like that is a la Nazis. The Nazis used these speeds and uppers. So yeah, you're dealing with that, and yet and it's ironic because we do get like criticized because we do have people in our far further right wing who verbalize what my daughter's logic. They're willing to verbalize it, which taints the entire country, even though in reality, my unit killed 6,000 people, of which 5,800 held weapons and were aiming at our soldiers. And of the other 200, 20 were our soldiers that we killed because we were confused by them. So it's like we're making every effort, and we're in this for 2 years, and it's killing us from the inside. Ironically, they're putting us in a situation that is just insufferable. There's even if you come to the conclusion that they have no moral compass, and you can be a little bit more relieved of these conventions, like I didn't say specifically which, but just these human conventions or morals. Even if you relieve yourself of that, if you are an actual human, there's only so many lives you can take. It's different for a fighter pilot. They drop a 1-ton bomb, they don't see the building. It's different for a ground soldier. They get fired at. It's a different type of PTSD. They respond with fire. Actually, it's the precision missiles, the electro-optic ones, the small ones, the ones that the UAVs use. That's like you sort of like formulate this intent to kill over a course of like a few hours. And you really have to sort of like really live with it, you know what I mean? Because you see it. You don't, it's not like a building, very rarely a car. You have to go through this like long incrimination process, and then only to be, to be blamed as being genocidal. It's like the one time you were pacifistic, your own people died. The few times you were. The one time you were trigger happy, you killed your own. So you see, they didn't have responders. It's like, it's nuts. Sorry, I took up a long time to come from the conversation, but when people are like attentive, I sort of open up, because otherwise it's like really traumatic.
Well, I appreciate you sharing, and again, like I said, I'm very sympathetic to the whole plight, and the I will say this, and I think people are genuinely struggling to try to find resolution. And to your point, I don't know that there is one. It's what do you convince them to do differently to find some harmony in the region? I don't know. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, I'm an eternal optimist, and I do believe that I think I can sort of see the powers at play here. Like an individual is fanaticized. An individual has their own sort of origin story. Some of them, by the way, I can see clearly how in 2009 they might have been 5 and their parents were obliterated next to them because they were Hamas terrorists or their human shields or whatever, or a mistake by us. Everything happens in war. And those 5-year-old orphans would have been groomed by a fanatic, and they would have grown up and poor and with the drugs. You know what? I can see how they would burn a baby. Like, really, I can see the cause and effect, the whole thing. That's on an individual level. But on a collective level, at the end of the day, it's leadership. Like the fact that actually, I'm most optimistic by the fact that all Arab leaders around us have always been multi-billionaires, which means that they are driven by where the best deal is. They care about the money. There's no pauper leaders there. There's no Nelson Mandela. There's nothing. There's no Gandhi. There's none of that. There's billionaires in hotels. And that means that they can be swayed to re-weaponize their masses in a different direction if the deal is right. The problem is that the way the world was sort of organized up until now, the deal wasn't right. When the Saudi accords are signed, I believe that the IMEC, the IMEC line will be laid from India through Saudi Arabia through Israel to Europe. And this will be the second Silk Road. This has been in plans for years, and it's going to happen soon, in my opinion. From the moment that pipe is laid, Russia loses a lot of relevance to the world, and therefore probably has previously decided to take over resources in the Ukraine because of that. And India gains a lot of power as a supply, as a vendor, and a replacement for China in a global competition, which is why China is going to take Taiwan no matter what we do, to hedge that. But when that pipe flows, and it will flow because the infrastructure from the east is shitty towards Europe, it's a dirty gas pipe. When that happens, just the rev share alone from that pipe will enable switching the entire region into a state of peace. The Saudis will say that they will save Gaza instead of letting Trump send all the Gazans out. Like that, Trump in that sense sort of anchored so that the moved the goalposts of the conversation. So the Saudis are no longer fighting for a Palestinian state. They will now do the Palestinians a favor if they buy them, if they rebuild Gaza. When will they rebuild Gaza? They will rebuild it. They will literally refinance Gaza with the pipe that they're building through it. It's so I see sort of that. I see that money. The only problem with that is that during this period, of course, the individual humans might act in continued cruelty and irrationality, and somebody might throw a dirty bomb at someone, and then you don't know where it takes a turn from there, and you have to sort of live through it. But if it follows through like that, then that's where we're going to. And Iran will turn democratic. They'll lose their regime because they won't be able to latch onto to supply to Europe. They'll have to become, excuse me, China's bitches, so sell to them. And Russia, I think, will just sort of like bridge to Putin's death before they have to decide which superpower they want to serve. And I think that culturally they won't want to serve the Chinese. Because they've been brain drained over the last 30 or 40 years, and their natural resources they won't be able to peddle them to Europe when this clean gas pipe is laid and oil pipe is laid.
Yeah.
That's sort of that for me. That's what relieves me of like having to think about the individual cruelty of this situation and suffering and all that stuff, like not being myself and think that there's never any resolution to this story of vengeance. But I do see that happening like that way.
That makes sense. And I believe, we of course are in our own turmoil over here sociopolitically with Trump getting reelected. And everybody's focused right now on the threat of these tariffs just destroying the economy. And what I'm a little bit like you, I'm seeing a bigger picture. Trump is not threatening the tariffs as an end game. It's his way of getting everybody to the table.
Yeah. Look, obviously he is taking risks. Like whoever simplifies Donald Trump to the point of saying that this is the philosophy and that's it, and that's the end game, with all due respect, like have a little bit respect for your elders. Sure, this guy has been dramatized a certain way and has contributed to it, but he's also been around the block and done a few deals in a specific industry that requires haggle type negotiation, which means anchoring, which means being crazy off the bat and settling for something that works. And he's approaching the presidency that way. And it's totally reasonable that if every other president in history approached it differently, it might seem weird to you. That doesn't make it necessarily wrong. It does make it risky, but I hope that he knows his assets and his strength. He's playing to his strengths. I think he is. But also I hope that from an ego perspective, he doesn't see it as a zero-sum game. I spoke with some U.S. congressmen and policymakers, and I said I like it. I see the bigger picture, but it doesn't correlate with expected concessions that the U.S. is going to have to make towards China. And I think it's going to either have to be, because the U.S. is going to come out on top, I think, but either without hegemony in Taiwan or without half of the resources in Africa. And the third alternative to that is a world war between India and Pakistan, a nuclear war between India and Pakistan, because that's China's last move on the board, is to destabilize India. So the US is going to have to not play like for, because of the US mentality is a mentality of knockout. Boxing is knockout. You don't draw. Even in soccer, you guys have a penalty kicks, right? If you go for the full win against an empire that's been around for at least 9 more iterations than the Western world, that will be painful, in my opinion. There has to. I hope the policymakers know where they're going to accept losses, and I think that they do know that. I think that when they create this
I
situation,
think they do.
I think they do. I think when they create this situation and transition tech companies back into the US, they're literally leveraging against some sort of like chip making island in Taiwan. I think they're seeing the big picture.
Yeah, I definitely think a couple of things have happened. I think in Trump's first term, he really didn't know how the system was wired in Washington. He really didn't. He was a true outsider. He had great ideas, but he really underestimated the magnitude. And I think he spent the last 4 years strategizing on what he learned and leveraging now what he does know. And he knows where the hidden switches are now, and he didn't know that the first time.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, you can see it clearly. There's no way.
I mean, the fact that simple indicators, the fact that he had his entire cabinet identified and ready to go for,
Oh yeah, that was amazing. What?
in the first 18 days or something, he had them all, lined up. And that's never happened before in a transition of administration. And for the first time, I can say as an American citizen, when I hear these guys showing up on the Sunday talk shows, they're all speaking from the same playbook.
Yep.
There is no deviation. There are no renegades. There are no,
There's no tell-all. There's nobody there to write a tell-all, and yeah, I totally and capitalize on what was last time seemingly like a temporary craze but that's how they positioned it. No, this is like real. There's what was it, 115 executive orders in 3 months, and they're all in line with the with his promises. You just gotta that's it. He's going in on that approach, and of course it's going to create a tremor. But S&P is already going up. I think it's going to be. I think. I hope that we skip the bit where we like sort of like entertain the physical war just because we have to go through it, right? There's like, if you look at history, like it works in cycles. I think we're ready to just skip the war bit to the transactions and growth, because the difference is that in an imperfect economy, that imperfection is caused by information gaps. There are far less information gaps. We know we can play to the end game what a war looks like, and none of us want it. So we can skip that. And when I say play to the end game, I don't only mean like nuclear demise. I mean that the Chinese know that they don't have enough. It's just not enough depth in terms of the tech. They'll flaunt it to their people, but it's not enough. They're going to suffer too many hundreds of millions of losses and a lot of ground. They're going to be reminded of the Mongolian Empire. The Russians know, and they saw it with their own eyes in the Ukraine, that their internal corruption has caused the literal tires in their trucks to block 20 kilometers worth of logistics routes just by trying to conquer a piece of the Ukraine. So they're not powerful to go on any offensive. And the West is, there's a lot of stupidity in the West, but we got our shit together, and it's a capitalistic meritocracy. So where talent is needed, that's where talent is at. And we're going to have bloody laser beams on their asses in no time. Because if anybody thinks these iron laser beams are for self-defense, they're like missing the point once they're airborne. So I think once they play it out to the end game, they know what's happening. And then they have to decide whether they lose in advance or whether they deal, which is why I hope that when it's time to deal, the US won't go for the jugular, like that it'll give the Chinese something. Because then if they're like completely with their backs to the wall, maybe they'll prefer some act of gross global violence. In which case, I predict they'll do it to the Indians. Um, but yeah, I think they played it out to the end game. But whereas in World War II, there were information gaps. There were literal encrypted information gaps in the Enigma. Like the news cycle was 6 hours. It's a different world. Those information gaps were abused to prosecute a war. It doesn't mean that that's the same thing that's going to happen now just because the heat it's getting hotter in the kitchen. I agree with you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I share what you said. I'm an eternal optimist. I know there are people, the left side of our political spectrum over here is just absolutely unhinged right now. I mean, they to perpetrate fire bombings on Tesla automobiles and dealers, what is that? Where does that even come from, and where does that even go? It's just sheer demented anger about not having your way, and
Yeah, it's demented.
it is really a unfortunate phenomenon, and I hate, as an American, I hate seeing that hit the news cycle on the world news. I was talking to a gentleman from the UK earlier this week. He's an investment banker, and we were talking about some possible transactions, and he said, to be honest, he said, the circle I'm in, our money, we're not excited about coming to America with it. And I said, okay, why? And he said, well, and he started reeling off a number of things, and it's just what I'm saying. I said, yeah, but you don't understand. Right now, Main Street American business is hopeful for the first time in a long time.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah. That's the problem I have. I've been toggling between left and right. Like I expect Israel in times of peace, like not in times of peace, in between wars, I expect Israel to schemingly infiltrate the Hezbollah with pagers and do that. But I expect Israel as a policy in between wars to actively invest and engage in infiltrating in any way possible the education systems of the Palestinians and their younger people, and put Israelis in front of them to prevent, as if like a real peace outreach initiative, to prevent them from being able to slowly weaponize and radicalize their people. So do the peace thing. Whereas I believe in war that we're following through. Like we're not stopping until the last hostage is back. And if anybody wants to argue with us, then they're gonna have to talk to the wall. But so I go between left and right. When it comes to economy, I do think that Israel's welfare state is something to look at. Like the welfare aspects are strong. I think that there's a lot of things in the US welfare side that are sad a little bit, and there is some inspiration to take from that, but the assets and the real value have to flow up to in accordance with meritocratic rules, even with the understanding that inheritance might enrich the rich. It's small price to pay, and the government should be less and less involved, except for where it invests in innovation, like literally trickles money into the economy to build it, not trickles money into the economy to pay people to close the month. And so I believe in that. I think that my problem with the left in the US and in Israel, by the way, over the last 4 years, is that I've realized this as someone who's relatively in the center. Both sides have ignorant buffoons. Let's just call it out. Like complete ignorant buffoons. Like people who I'm happy they only have one vote on election day and very little sway between election days. That's it. The problem is that you're seeing now for the first time in a long time, like really, that the right, like the Republicans, have put up they have elected like enthroned and put at their front lines they're capable and their representatives are speaking, like you said, same tone, structured, organized. They're the smart people. Their billionaires are out there, or their entrepreneurs are out there taking responsibility and speaking out. The left, who their successful business people and entrepreneurs are in the shadows somewhere, literally feeding the deep state ideas, and what they put in the front is their buffoons.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So and that is like already criminal towards your entire country, because now when people look at your country from the outside, what they see is buffoonery.
Well, there is an argument to be made following your spectrum there. You said that some of the rich that are involved now in power plays, and specifically Elon Musk and all of his cronies from Silicon Valley, they are all self-made billionaires, but they didn't do it by insider trading and all that other. They
Yeah.
built
Yeah.
enterprises that made money.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course.
And
Yeah. I said they're capable. Yeah.
you do go to the left, and there are plenty of people, they have money now, but they've done it with connections and various forms of insider trading,
Yeah.
right up to the line of not being guilty of it, but nonetheless
Yeah.
benefited from it. And I like your analogy there. But the smart money has found loose mouth buffoons to stand up and speak the message so that they don't have to.
Yeah, but that comes, of course, at a cost of the perception of your, like, people are asked, aren't you afraid of the protests against Israel in the U.S. and all those places? Well, if I was like, a very outward, extroverted Jew in the middle of such a protest, maybe I would be afraid. Am I afraid of what these protests mean for the Jews? No, I think that any reasonable American citizen who lives a normal life, which means they make, ends meet and, have a family and educate their children. I cannot see how any normal person who went through those motions in life can identify with any of the individuals walking in the streets in these protests. These are not Nazis walking in an orderly salute and who actually prioritize real education and and thoroughness over other values. These are people that I don't think anybody really identifies with, and I don't think they identify with themselves. So they are reduced to whatever message is fed to them in the stupidest and like weirdest of ways, like what images of like violence that are there to trigger you. Like, what's the deal? What's the it's still, I think in the age of AI, it might change a little bit.
Well, I think you're right, and then you bring in the layer of social development via social media, and development is given a lot of credit. It's really going backward, meaning we've got young people that cannot sustain a relationship with anybody, a meaningful human relationship, because they're so crippled by how they've embraced social media. And as they come of age, they're looking for connection that's real connection, not the electronic,
without the tools to do it.
without the tools to be able to do it.
Yeah.
So they hear a voice in the woods that sounds interesting, and they show up, and next thing you know, you have a mob scene going on.
Yep. Yep. It's the age of AI is going to be interesting. Conversations with GPT are gonna change a little bit. This is like a vacuum sort of period of abuse of this like dopamine addiction that sends you back into the reels, the algorithm, etc. I think that I don't think they'll, tomorrow morning educate themselves on how to actually speak with other human beings and conduct a respectful conversation. And recuse themselves of a conversation they don't have information or background about, which people just don't seem to do anymore, right? People don't
Right.
recuse themselves of something they haven't studied, which is
Right.
unheard of in like for me anyway, and I'm sure for you, right?
Right.
But I think it's going to change a little bit. I think this AI thing is going to change it a little bit, mix it up. I mean, I play around with it a lot, and I got two startups in this space that I think are interesting. So I'm confident. Obviously, I'm aware of the risks and where it has shortcomings. But in terms of how humans interact with each other, I think it's going to be a little bit more similar to how we interacted, because right now the medium is reduced to this swiping and scrolling, whereas with it the medium is different. It goes back to a communication. It's ironic that it's not with an actual human being, but the communication becomes a bit different. Yeah. Anyway, well, look at what happened. We had just this conversation. I actually don't even know, because I saw your podcast Headways about what do you normally speak about?
Normally, well, consistent with the name of the show, Leadership Powered by Common Sense, I try to take leadership issues and speak with my guests about, breaking it down into some digestible, easy to understand, bite-sized nuggets. I'm sitting here. I told you, I teased that the difficulty you and I had putting this together was probably going to be an incredible episode. I have tended historically, not tended, I absolutely historically, I've never done a political episode on this show. However,
Mhm.
I'm sitting here processing as we've been discussing. I think this conversation is fascinating, and I mean, with your consent, I think I would like to package it almost organically as we did it, and put it out there. I think it's a meaningful, and what I like about it, I mean, you have your own stature in your community and in your country there. Um, I think, and again, no disrespect at all, but having two normal adults talking about these things without having to be at each other's throat over some particular agenda item, uh, I think that's healthy in the big scheme of things. And whoever may want choose to listen in and consume it, so be it. But I'm liking the idea of letting this air as we've done it. Well, tell me a little bit about your business side. You
Oh, yeah,
mentioned
sure.
two startups. What are they
Yeah.
doing?
So one of them is changing the world that I grew up in. I was 16 years a corporate lawyer. I represented about 500 startup companies from inception through their entire life cycle in a magic circle firm in Israel. I believe that with the right agentic AI approach, and when I say right, I mean it's novel and it's not currently, from what we see, deployed this way by anyone. We can today build the infrastructure for what will be about 5 to 10 years from now, the largest consulting firm in the world, which is 1% human, which is not confined by predetermined deliverables that it creates or documents, but rather enables certain discretion and freedom for agents that we built properly. And that means a lot. There's a lot in that. And map out properly in the structure of the firm to. So yeah, so built right. I think that clients, especially early stage companies, will go to ARC for business, financial, legal, banking, corporate advisory services. And us more expert humans or advisors to humans will be invited into an already live chat to provide our 2 cents. We'll be able to monetize that in a highly democratized manner. but we will no longer have the privilege of operating human pyramid schemes, which is what I call large law firms or large banking firms. So I do think it's a sort of revenge of the boomers. I think you'd probably be invited into a chat to give your leadership counseling and advice, but the pact with the client would be if they really pay you for what you have to say and not just pay your team by the hour. Because what you have to say will immediately be interpreted by the AI and built into actual actionable documentation on the spot. So that's one. The other company is more impactful, needs far less money. Pretty much looking for another 200K. We raised about 400, and we make some revenues off the bat. We're launching on May 1st. It's headquartered in the UK. I gave 70% of the company to my best friend and a founder that I really admire. I think he's a great CEO. He's running it from the UK, and the company is called For Posterity. And it basically can listen to someone tell you a story of their lives about themselves for about 5-10 minutes and immediately turn it into a 10 to 20,000 page book, 10 to 20,000 word book for next of kin, like grandchildren, great-grandchildren. And you can either print the book immediately, and it doesn't matter how you mumble or speak or structure the story or make mistakes. It doesn't matter. It'll understand what main events you went through. It'll understand your style. It'll compose a plan and a story arc and drama, and it'll expand where it can, where it's correct to do so, and you'll get something respectable that will last for generations in your family.
Wow, that's great.
And then you can, of course, get it as an audio book in your voice and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But the AI play there is to build a team of highly sophisticated and collaborative agents whose expertise is in the creation of autobiographies based on disorganized content, like and not like the structured flow that a lot of softwares might do or autobiographers might try to put you through. Because the idea is you actually don't have time. You might need it for the 80th birthday, or you might be in a worse situation, or you might just feel like sharing now because that's when you feel like sharing. So that's Posterity. That's launching on the 1st of May.
Oh, fascinating.
I can send you their decks if you're interested.
Yeah, please do. Please do. That sounds fascinating. All right, Nimrod, I'm going to let you go. I will figure out how to get this edited together. And
if you want to have the conversation, by the way, again at one point, and then I'll make sure to treat it as if it's going out live. Then we can do it again. I guess I just enjoyed the talk.
I did too. You're really good, and I do believe in divine appointments, and I think this is definitely stands up to that.
So,
all right, have a great rest of your day.
Bye.
You've been listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, hosted by Doug Thorpe. If you would like to know more about the coaching and advisory services he provides, visit dougthorpe.com.